An Ethiopian man shrouded in mystery spent more than 40 years guarding a technique that takes just 60 seconds. A technique so absurdly powerful that Abdullah never taught it in public. He never wrote a book, never gave lectures. He only shared it in private, almost whispering, one student at a time. And something unsettling happened. A completely ruined man heard about that technique one Tuesday afternoon. The next morning, unexpectedly, he received thousands of dollars. But Abdullah always gave a warning that left everyone silent. This only works once in a lifetime. Not because it loses its power, but because after experiencing it, you are never the same person again. So do something for me right now. Close the other tabs. Mute your phone. Stop looking at anything else for a few minutes, because what you're about to hear isn't just another recycled motivational speech from the internet by someone with teeth that are too white and a rented Lamborghini. This is something else. This is an activation born almost 100 years ago in a small apartment in Harlem, New York, and that forever transformed the few people who lived there.
Dije, escuchar, no visualizar, no leer, escuchar. Porque Abdullah entendía algo que la ciencia apenas empieza a aceptar hoy. El oído es la puerta más directa al subconsciente. Puedes cerrar los ojos, puedes apartar la mirada, puedes ignorar lo que no quieres ver, pero no puedes apagar completamente tus oídos. Siempre están recibiendo.
When an idea enters your mind and is met with enough faith, something awakens inside you, something that can no longer go back to sleep. But before I reveal the secret to you, I need to prepare your mind. Because Abdullah insisted on something very simple. The most powerful truths of the universe do not enter a mind full of noise, fear, and constant doubts. They need space, openness, receptivity. And right now, I'm going to help you believe it. The exercise is so simple that your logical mind will probably say, "Really? This? Yes, really." That's exactly why it works. Put your right hand on the middle of your chest, right where you feel your heart when something truly excites you. Now close your eyes. Take 3 deep breaths, slowly, from your abdomen. And as you inhale, imagine the smell of new bills, that metallic scent, dry, unmistakable. The smell of freshly printed money. Don't analyze it, smell it. Imagine that smell entering your nose, filling your lungs, and spreading throughout your whole body. Do it now. 3 breaths. Hand on your chest, eyes closed. Feeling that the money is already coming to you. Perfect. Because you just activated what Abdullah called the state of reception. That moment when the subconscious stops resisting and starts accepting. And from that state, write this exact phrase in the comments. Wealth has already been accepted by my mind. Now it manifests. It's not just a comment. It's a decision, a point of no return. The exact moment when you choose to let this moment, this video, these words, divide your financial life into 2 completely different stages. A before and after. Write it down with certainty, like someone who already knows something has been set in motion. Because what you're hearing doesn't come from a modern spiritual influencer. It wasn't born on TikTok. It didn't come from a self-help course with epic music in the background. It comes from a man who chose to live in the shadows, a man who never sought fame. He never asked for money, he never wanted followers. And yet, he ended up becoming the silent root of almost everything we know today as manifestation, the law of attraction, and the power of the subconscious. His name was Abdullah, and for decades no one knew if he had really existed. Many thought he was a fictional character, just another spiritual legend, until something unexpected happened. Modern researchers found actual copyright records in Manhattan dated 1935, documents linked to a specific address, even musical compositions registered under the name Abdullah, appeared, real evidence. Proof that the most mysterious man in the modern spiritual world did exist. And his story was even more shocking than they imagined. Abdullah was an Ethiopian Jew born in North Africa during the 19th century. He grew up in a strict Orthodox family. He spoke Hebrew perfectly. He mastered the deepest secrets of the Kabbalah, that ancient tradition which, according to many, holds the keys to creation itself. He knew several languages. But even more impressive than his knowledge was his presence. He had such an extraordinary inner confidence that even Neville Goddard, the man who would go on to revolutionize manifestation in the 19th century,
hablaba de él casi con temor.
And he said something that made it clear who Abdullah really was. If I ever called a man master, that man would be Abdullah. In the 1920s, Abdullah opened a small teaching center in Harlem, just as New York was exploding with creativity, art, and spiritual searching. But he was not a traditional guru. There were no ads, no posters, no absurd promises of manifesting a Ferrari in 24 hours. Just small groups gathered in silence inside his apartment. 12 people, sometimes 20. And in that discreet place in Manhattan, something began that would forever change the history of modern spirituality. In 1929, a young dancer named Neville Goddard arrived at one of those meetings. He was born in Barbados, moved to New York to pursue his artistic dream, and for years performed on major stages in the city until the Great Depression destroyed everything. But stronger than the economic crisis was the feeling of emptiness he carried inside.
Algo lo estaba llamando, y ese algo lo llevó una noche hasta Abdullah.
After the talk, Abdullah walked straight toward him. He stared at him and said something unbelievable. Neville is 6 months late. Neville was stunned. He had never seen that man before. He had never been there before. He hadn't even said he was going to go. But Abdullah smiled calmly and said, "The brothers doubted me. They said you would come. He spent months waiting for you." Neville never knew who the brothers were, and honestly, that only made everything stranger. For the next 5 years, Abdullah taught him things that would completely change his life. Hebrew, Kabbalah, psychological interpretation of the Bible, but above all, a revolutionary idea. External reality is first born in consciousness. However, of all the things he taught,
enseñanzas, existía una que reservaba solo para unos pocos, la más poderosa de todas, el secreto del minuto. Neville lo descubrió una noche de invierno, desesperado porque nada de lo que intentaba parecía funcionar. Abdullah lo escuchó.
Silence, and then he said something brutally simple. Your problem isn't faith. Your problem is being happy.
Sigues buscando tu deseo en el futuro, en lugar de
only now. Then he added, the subconscious doesn't understand tomorrow, it only understands the present. Neville then asked how much time he needed to really impress the subconscious, and Abdullah replied, 1 minute, just 60 seconds, experienced with absolute intensity. 1 minute where you see, hear, touch, and feel that your desire is already real, where all your senses confirm the experience at the same time. Because for the subconscious, what is experienced with intense emotion has already happened. And once it accepts something as real, the outside world begins to reorganize itself around that idea. That was the secret, without complicated rituals, without endless hours of meditation, without magic formulas. Just 1 minute that felt completely real. Abdullah called it the miracle minute and claimed that whoever truly applied it would never see reality the same way again. Why did Abdullah say that this technique only works once in a lifetime? Neville asked him that as well. Afterwards, does it stop working? Abdullah answered something that changed the way he thought forever. It doesn't stop working. What disappears is the doubt. Because after witnessing an important result with your own eyes, After seeing how money, opportunities, or answers come in ways that don't make sense, you no longer need to convince yourself of anything, you just know. And according to Abdullah, there are two types of faith. The first is fragile faith, the kind that needs to repeat affirmations all day, constantly watch videos, and perform rituals because deep down, it still doubts. A faith so weak that any problem breaks it in two. But then there's the other kind, the faith born from direct experience, the one that has already seen real results, the one that has already tested the law, the one that doesn't need to shout or convince anyone, it just knows. And the Miracle Minute exists to take you from one kind of faith to the other, just once. Because after that,
Ya no vuelves a pensar igual.
and now listen to this, because this is where the story gets really absurd. December 1933, right in the middle of the Great Depression. The United States was economically devastated. Millions without jobs, without money, without hope. And Neville Goddard was one of them. He lived in New York completely broke, but he had a desire that obsessed him day and night. To return to Barbados, to spend Christmas with his family after 12 years without seeing them. The problem was simple. He didn't have a single cent. He went to see Abdullah, desperate, expecting complex instructions, some strange ritual, anything. But Abdullah just said, "Close your eyes. You have 1 minute. I want Barbados now." Not as a wish, as a present reality. Neville obeyed, and for 60 seconds he stopped being in Manhattan. He felt the tropical air on his skin. He heard the waves of the Caribbean. He heard his brothers calling him. He smelled the salty air and the flowers of the island. He tasted the mango his mother was preparing. He saw the family house lit up at Christmas. He didn't imagine it as a fantasy. He experienced it as reality. And when he opened his eyes, Abdullah smiled slightly and said, "You've already been to Barbados and you traveled first class." 4 days later, something impossible happened. Neville received a letter from his brother. Inside, there was cash and a boat ticket to Barbados. And here comes the part that makes this story almost impossible to ignore. Neville's brother was on another continent. He didn't know anything about his wish. Neville never asked him for help. Not even a letter. Not even a phone call. Nothing. He just felt the urge to bring the family together at Christmas. He sent him the money and the ticket. But the most incredible part is still to come. When Neville arrived at the port with his third-class ticket, the clerk checked the list. He looked up and said, "Mr. Goddard, your reservation was canceled this morning. The only available place is first class. At no additional cost? First class." Exactly as Abdullah had said days before, when Neville had no money or real chance to travel. And that's what Neville understood that night. Abdullah wasn't predicting the future. He knew a law that, according to him, responds to the intensity with which a reality is accepted internally. Because the subconscious does not manifest what you superficially desire. It manifests what it accepts as truth. And it accepts as truth what your senses experience, as if it were present. Not what you repeat mechanically, not what you write 100 times, not what you hope for someday, but what you feel is real right now. That's why 1 minute is enough. Because the subconscious doesn't measure duration, it measures intensity. 60 seconds of total emotional experience can have more power than entire years of empty repeated affirmations. Like a tired parrot at 3 in the morning. Abdullah explained it with a simple image. A single lit match instantly lights up a dark room. You don't need 1,000 techniques. You need one completely real moment. And Neville said he had seen this law at work over and over again. In his book, The Law and the Promise, published in 1961, he told the story of a woman who was on the verge of a complete breakdown. She was unemployed, no money, her car was wrecked, she was behind on her rent, and she had no one to ask for help. Every night before going to sleep, she did exactly what Abdullah taught. For a whole minute, she felt like her life had already changed. She felt new clothes in her hands. She heard the doors of a new life opening. She smelled the clean interior of a car that was running perfectly and repeated silently, "Something wonderful is happening to me now." She wasn't begging. She wasn't chasing signs. She wasn't trying to control the how. She was living that minute as absolutely real. 2 months later, something unexpected happened. An acquaintance I hadn't seen in decades showed up with an envelope. Inside was a certified check for $2,500. An old millionaire friend had decided to share part of his fortune with people he remembered fondly, and she was on that list. After that first check, something even stranger happened. The payments kept coming for years, and she didn't change the method. She didn't perform new rituals. She didn't look for more complex formulas. She just kept her minute of total presence every night. And this is where Abdullah got frustrated with most people. Because according to him, the real enemy of manifestation is not doubt. It's simplicity. Yes, simplicity. People can't stand the idea that something so brief and so simple can change a life. The ego wants difficult processes, endless methods, suffering, sacrifice, because it feels that if something is valuable, it must be complicated. That's why, when they hear that everything can start with a minute of absolute presence, they react the same way. It can't be that easy. And that's exactly where they block it. Do you notice that voice inside you? The one who tries, who looks for the catch, who says something must be missing. That was exactly what Abdullah was describing. And now listen to this carefully, because here is the entire core of the method. The first step was to enter the state of receptivity. That moment right before falling asleep when you're not fully awake but not asleep either. Neville called it the state akin to sleep.
Ahí la mente consciente baja la guardia y el subconsciente queda abierto, sin esfuerzo, sin tensión, solo relajación total.
The second step was to create a single final scene, not a long mental movie, not 20 desires all mixed together. A brief and specific scene that implies your wish has already come true. See your account balance, hearing someone congratulating you, sitting calmly knowing that you already have everything you need. Simply real, concrete. And then came the real secret, the minute of the 5 senses. This is where almost everyone fails, because they imagine but they don't feel. Abdullah insisted on using all 5 senses at the same time. See, hear, touch, smell, even taste, all at the same time. Because when all your senses report to your subconscious that something is already real, the impression becomes so deep that the mind stops arguing about it. And that's where the change begins. But there was an even more important detail than the 5 senses, the feeling. Not exaggerated emotion, not forced euphoria. Don't act like a motivational salesman at 6 in the morning. Abdullah was talking about a much deeper feeling of someone who already got what they wanted. Peace of mind. Silent gratitude. The warm feeling that everything is okay. Because, according to him, the subconscious doesn't understand words. It understands feelings. Images speak a foreign language. Feeling speaks the native language of the subconscious. And after that minute came the last step. Sleep, nothing else, no analyzing. Don't chase signs. Don't obsess over when it will come. Just sleep and let the subconscious do its job without interference from the anxious mind. Abdullah used to say that doubting after a minute is like planting a seed and digging it up every 5 minutes to check if it has grown. Something interesting happens here. While you're listening to this, something inside you has probably already started to change. Not as a nice spiritual metaphor, like a real process, because there are ideas that when you hear them, they don't feel new, they feel familiar. As if a part of you said, I already knew this. And when that memory awakens, you start to notice strange things. Unexpected calls, opportunities that appear by chance, money coming from unlikely sources, people entering your life at the exact right moment. Abdullah insisted, there are no coincidences. What exists is the law responding to your inner state. But before finishing, there is a warning that he repeated with total seriousness. The miracle minute doesn't work from a place of desperation. If you do the exercise feeling anxiety, urgency, fear, disguised as faith, that's exactly what the subconscious receives. And that's what it ends up reflecting. The key isn't to desire as if you're empty, but to feel as if you already have. That's where the whole difference lies. And maybe that's why Abdullah never chased fame. He never wrote books. He never tried to become a spiritual celebrity. He never filled stadiums because he understood something that almost no one understands. Money was not the final destination. It was just the first proof that the law works. When they asked him why he lived so simply despite having such knowledge, he replied with something that Neville never forgot. Material wealth is only the first chapter. The problem is that most people only learn to read and never enter the library. Years later, Abdullah disappeared as mysteriously as he appeared. But Neville spoke of him with absolute reverence until the end of his life. Everything I teach I learned from Abdullah, and now I want you to think about this. Maybe you didn't come across this message by accident. Maybe there was something inside you looking for exactly this. Because some people hear these ideas and forget them in 5 minutes, but others feel like something gets activated, as if a piece finally fit. And if you made it this far, maybe you're one of those people. Now you have the method. To sleep, you only need 1 minute. 60 real seconds. 60 seconds where your senses, your body, and your mind accept that abundance already exists. Because the subconscious doesn't respond to time, it responds to intensity. And a single minute lived as if it were true can completely change the course of a life.